Hi there, my name is Bianca Lopes, and it's my pleasure to welcome on our World Stage of Americas. If you've been following our event today, you might have gone to Canada, to Brazil, and to Colombia, and now I bring you a topic that is near and dear to my heart as an identity strategist and data expert. For the past few years, I've been entertained by what is happening when it comes to biometrics, a topic that expands the Americas and has an opportunity to not only address financial inclusion, which is an issue that we've heard throughout today's theme and event, but also an opportunity to change the industry when it comes to security. We've all seen what's been happening to data, residency, and a heightened degree of protection when it comes to identifying people on a digital landscape. Biometrics to me has always been the last mile between the human and the technology. And when asked in the conference organization and planning this wonderful chat for you, I couldn't help but to think of somebody that I admire and have a lot of time and respect for in this industry. So let me welcome the CEO and co-founder of FacePhi, Javier Mira, a dear friend and mentor of mine. Javier, welcome to this event.
Hello, Bianca. Hello, everyone. Pleasure being here and trying to share with you some of the experience with FacePhi.
Some of the experiences we've been having in this biometric identity landscape when I think you and I were in some stage at Money 2020 in a tiny corner telling people, listen, this is kind of a big deal. This will kind of change. So tell people a little bit for the ones that don't have the privilege of knowing you and FacePhi, what FacePhi is all about. What is FacePhi? What do you do? And where do you act when it comes to biometric and identity?
Thank you, Bianca. I remember very well many of the conferences that we've been trying to push the use of biometrics in several scenarios.
When people used to think sci-fi, right, Javier? People used to think that it's just like, it's some crazy thing that will happen. Now here we are. The pandemic has forced us to think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the sentences that we've been listening many times is kind of, this is Minority Report. We know that it's going to be the future, and the thing is that it's not the future; it's the present, and it's going to stay for a long period. We think. FacePhi is a company that is specialized in facial recognition technologies, even though we do have some other technologies related to biometrics, and we're really focused on a financial sector in order to try to change the way people interact with their own bank in order to make transactions, to do the enrollment process, in order to open an account, etc., and trying to improve this user experience by using technology that is somehow more convenient and obviously more secure than using a PIN code, any other method. We started in 2014 selling to a couple of accounts, and so far we have about 65 accounts. Banks very happy about using our technology, about how they've been really capable to change the way the end users are interacting with the app, with the bank, in order to improve a daily task in a single day. And we are very happy, and customers are very happy. We recently have a big case in Argentina where pensionists, with this situation that is affecting us with the pandemic, the government just tried to give some help, some grants, and to pay pensions without going to the branch office of the bank. And they gave us the opportunity to make the integration with FacePhi's product called Selfie ID in order to verify people, elderly people, in order to receive the pension without going to the branch office, and obviously avoiding the contact that is so important today. So FacePhi is trying to help as much as possible using biometrics, and we are trying to do our best, and especially in the market in Latin America, where we are pretty strong.
A lot of people, thank you for that overview, Javier. I think a lot of people have now become a little bit more familiar than our early on days when we were talking about biometrics is not a sci-fi and Minority Report, but there's still some resistance. What do you see? You operate in multiple countries. You've just recently set up shop in Uruguay. You have opened places in America and Korea. What do you see in the Americas? What do you see in the progression? Like, how is Latin America, as an example, a country that is really what's driving the use of biometrics before sort of COVID, and how has that accelerated? I think it's always an interesting question to look at. Is it fraud driven? Is it an opportunity for banks to really reduce what we've seen? Horrible examples of Danske Bank and other things, but financial crime. And I think in a digital world now more than ever. What do you see? What have you seen over the years? And sort of when you think of that market, What do you see today?
Well, we've seen 3, 4, 5 years ago, the Latin America market had a big need in order to implement this type of technologies because first one, level of fraud, identity fraud was very high.
Yeah.
And
We're pretty
but at the
creative.
same time, yeah,
We have a lot of
it's
people
true.
pretty creative.
Yeah, but if you combine this level of avoiding the fraud together with the combined with the user experience that you are offering to your clients, and at the same time, you know that many, I would say many banks or all of the banks are trying to do the digital transformation process, and in some cases they are analyzing that within this digital transformation process is a big part in order to somehow push the electronic channels of communication with the clients. And in that specific scenario, biometrics are taking a big part of the pie in terms of enhancing the user experience and somehow putting in a simple way, easy way to interact with the bank, avoiding making the queue in front of the branch office, etc. Latin America was capable to drive the change. We were together with the banks going to the regulators in each of the markets in order to somehow adapt regulation to these new technologies. Regulators were receiving very positively this type of technologies. So at the end, is a combination of private sector fintechs, companies providing the technology, and also regulators accepting and somehow regulating the use of these technologies. At the same time, you say there are some rejections to use biometrics. It's true. At the end, all technologies, you have people that they know how to use it, and some companies and people they don't know how to use it. Privacy is a key point for the use of biometrics. So as long as the company and the private sector and the public sector is somehow committed with the privacy and is paying attention to the protection of the data, the technology is going to go in a very nice way. For example, FacePhi, we are always in 100% of the projects. Whenever you are going to use the biometrics in our solutions, we need the end user to approve the use of these biometrics. So we are not selling facial recognition to any company that it's detecting Bianca without your permission in advance.
So you talked about a few interesting topics in terms of one, I think is a challenge when it comes to the regulatory framework, sort of catching up with how the technology has evolved. I think we've seen this in non-regulated environments like social media and things like FaceApp that I think bring the sort of, I wouldn't call it fake news, but lack of real understanding in this marketplace of what is the danger or the responsibility on it. When it comes to your clients, what kind of work do you still think we need to do as an industry when we look at fintech and we look at sort of the educational, what is the challenge ahead? Like how far are we from really taking consent seriously and sort of building standards that are interoperable? Because today's Face App versus Face ID versus Apple ID versus FacePhi are different and they're not interoperable fully. Where and this goes sort of my bias towards I think where the industry needs to go, but where do you see it, Javier? Where do you see that progression? Do you see us moving in the right direction? Do you think that you talked about regulators being willing to listen? What's left to do, or what's the next big chunk of work with things like open banking now?
Well, I think that there is a lot of work to do, especially I think there is a lot of education that from our point of view, together with banks, together with public institutions, we need to somehow explain very carefully and with patience the use of biometrics and how the technology can help us to improve many of the tasks that we are doing every single day. The problem is that when we are not capable to explain how biometrics are working, obviously people are afraid of how are going to be used my face, my fingerprint.
It's natural, I think.
Exactly. So FacePhi is always on the position together, just sit down beside the regulators because we think that we have to build this world, on this new world together. It doesn't fit a world just with the technology, even if it's the best disruptive technology, you need to be regulated just to avoid a bad use of the technology. So now we are trying to change the regulation also in Europe in order to help people to use this technology without all these barriers that we have today. We have the chance to change this in, for example, in South Korea, where before, about 3-4 months ago, when you want to open an account, you have to receive a video call in order to certify that you are the right people, showing your ID. Without this video call, it was impossible to open an account. We worked together with a couple of banks in South Korea, FacePhi, and the regulators in South Korea. They agreed that the technology was good enough to avoid this video call. And now we've been the first company in South Korea capable to do the digital onboarding process 100% contactless free in order to open an account. So at the end, regulators they need to understand the technology, the needs of the end user using this technology, and that the companies are somehow accomplishing everything from the security point of view, privacy point of view, and all the stuff. So I think we are on the same path, but it's important to do the educational to the end user.
What is the I couldn't agree more. I think we're congratulations on Korea. Like, that must have been a hard thing to sort of come across. And I think one of the things that I've always admire, and I think we've always talked about, is that a lot of the technologies that came out of biometrics or the data space were heavily technical. I know you have a personal history of working for 7 years with an algorithm, not making money, to make sure that it worked, to really prove the point of what does it take like to build a data-driven organization. A lot of fintechs don't have the time, or burn through cash and don't have the patience, but they value something that FacePhi stands out for, which is design and user experience. What is the opportunity when a fintech is thinking, is it too expensive for them? If we have a lot of fintechs listening to today and they're thinking, they know they need to be digital, a lot of them are digitally native, and they might have put off this identity conversation and authentication conversation to later on because they're more focused on their product. What is the opportunity for them? Like, how can they lead the charge, or how can they look at this through lenses of protecting their customer and really building an outstanding experience?
I think we've been talking about this in many conferences. I think always the secret, if there is a secret, it's keeping the balance between user experience, security. So at the end, you can have a very good algorithm capable to do fantastic things. But if this technology is not arriving to the right hands at the right moment with the right user experience, the algorithm is not going to work. Mm-hmm. We are really impatient today. If you download an app, you try to use, and it's not working for 1 single second, you don't give the app a second chance. We are just living in a world that we don't give a second chance, and we need to have it the right way, in the right second. So at the end, you can have an engine of an algorithm very powerful, but at the end, you need to somehow get in love with the end user by using your technology, because it's supposed that the security point of view, the privacy, data management, etc., is already done. But at the end, you have to get in love with the end user. Otherwise, it's not going to be used. It's not going to be using your technology for a second time. So I think this is the key point, I would say.
The key competitive advantage. I think Talle has recently done a result of a survey of looking at the top digital banks in Latin America, and most of them have an insane amount of screens when it comes to identification and enrollment. So maybe here's the hint for all of you listening that your onboarding journey might need biometrics. Don't believe me and Javier? Let's talk about some hot news that happened last week with Amazon launching Amazon One. So Amazon is one of the king of known well experiences, the balance, security, and convenience for the client. So what do you think, Javier? The first time I saw it, I have to admit, pretty sure Amazon copied a video I created like 5 years ago with a little bit more money. And then the second reaction I had as a person from the industry was, are we going back to palm vein POS readers? Like, what is it? What would you say? What would you interpret? And I guess, what is the future? If a bank or a fintech is looking at, is it palm vein? Is it face? We've seen face grow. You have a bias. What is it?
Well, even though FacePhi, the name FacePhi, is a company doing facial recognition, whenever someone is asking me about which one is the best biometric to use, mm-hmm. the answer is always the same. It depends. I may use facial recognition for a specific scenario, and I would love to use palm vein for a specific scenario, and why not? My voice in some specific scenario. What is true is that what is completely over, it's a PIN code, a password, that the number one password in the world is 1234566. So it doesn't make any sense.
Which is great.
Password. But using biometrics, I think it's going to be a combination. Hopefully, if I would make a forecast about the use of biometrics, I would say probably we'll be able to choose the biometrics by ourselves depending on the scenario. I may use facial recognition to make in a very easy way whenever I want to withdraw some money from an ATM, like in Caixa. And on the other side, I prefer to use voice because I'm calling to someone and I don't want to do a selfie for that specific task. So I think it's going to be a combination. The movement of Amazon, I think, is an answer also to the news that they were launching together with IBM and some other company about facial recognition, because they were selling the algorithm for some police departments, and the police departments were using one-to-one facial recognition without the permission of the end users. So this is somehow a conflict, and the privacies and the age, on the thing that we believe that things should be in the right way. But in many other scenarios, facial recognition is going to be the simplest way, because at the end, when I see your face, I know who you are. And it's very simple to analyze the features of the face and react in front of the camera. So facial recognition, I think, is one of the most convenient biometrics. But as I said, I think the best is a combination of many others.
When you think about the journey of the Americas and banking, where do you still see? I know you've recently been working with expanding away from banking and further into telecommunications. I'm a firm believer in the world where we're going to see not only open finance, but open data. And identity will play a key role to it. And I think this is a measurement to your success and sort of prediction on the future. Do you think this will be across industries? Do you think is that your hope for the future as an identity leader as well, Javier? To see really interoperability when it comes to facial recognition or other biometric standards, from telco to retail to banking, because let's get real, everything has technology today. So
yeah, I think you're right. We thought about 5 years ago that the finance industry, the finance sector, will be probably the driver of implementing biometrics in applications on web banking, etc. But we are completely sure that once finance sector started using this type of technologies, many other sectors will follow this use. And we just we're on the right, because last year also hospitals are implementing facial recognition. For example, we just have an hospital in South Korea as well, in Seoul, where the patient is making the verification with the face without any card and any password. Also, we have some insurance companies doing the same in order to make the verification of the patient. The digital onboarding process is exactly the same as we do in the finance. We also see a big movement from telcos, where they are somehow, they are again, like a finance industry, they're making the digital transformation process, and part of this process is opening arms in order to receive a lot of people without going to the branch office. So today, our window to the new world is this, and you need to do everything from your app in order to verify, authenticate your client, etc. So at the end, many sectors are coming. Gambling, many other companies, e-retailing, etc., are adopting this type of technology. So I think that the trend is very clear.
When we think about, I'm super hopeful as well for the trend. If you were to say, what are some of the perhaps challenges? We talked about a few of the misconceptions in terms of user consent, a care for privacy. What are some of the challenges? Is it for banks mostly attracting talent? Is it understanding this? Is it an integration nightmare as they're moving from legacy towards digitalization? Where do you see the friction in this really becoming a standard, and people stop talking about as if it's a matter of, it's not a nice to have anymore? And I agree with you. I think that the COVID-19 situation has been horrific to lots of things, but has only shown us flaws in existing infrastructure. I think we saw that with the number of fraud that has grown even on the retail sector and going digital. I think it's proven a point that we've been all trying to make in this industry for a few years. What's still holding people up? Is it an investment thing? Is that if people are sitting there being like, oh, I don't know if I have the money, or what is it that's holding up acceleration?
Before, I think it was, well, they had a lot of excuses. No money, no investment, not the right moment.
I love
Probably the
that.
future.
I used to talk to banks too, and they're like, yeah, we have no money for this. I was like, but you're spending $70 million on a PwC consulting report to do digitalization and identifying people it's not a priority.
Yeah,
Interesting.
exactly. Today is completely the opposite. But at the same time, after this first period of no money, no investment, whatever, then it came when probably we need to do that. We need this type of product. We need to implement that. But there was not any expert within the bank.
Okay.
Banks didn't have any IT people really an expert in biometrics or identity management. We noticed that in the last couple of years, whenever we go to a big bank, global bank, we see that they have their own department with people specialized in identity management. They know that data is going to be the new gold, the new coin. So they are paying much attention. So now it's quite easy to try to expose your solution, the problem you're trying to solve to these people. These people is understanding the solution, is going down deep into the detail of the technology, and somehow it's a little bit easier. So probably the barriers now are more like regulation than the private sector. Private sector is completely aligned in order to implement these technologies. Now we have to go to try to jump this wall of the regulators.
To talk cross collaboration. I totally believe that that's what it'll take for innovation to truly be interoperable and adopted. We had some great chats earlier today at Fintech South about sort of the role of the government and all of this and how institutions can bring about even collaborations of sandboxes. Like we've seen this happen to payments. I think it's only a matter of time until it happens to identity. And I think I'm really glad to see companies like you really bringing that forward. I think it's been my passion for so many years of people really understanding the power of identity. Connecting to data as we're closing off, like I think a lot of people don't understand the connection of identity and data when they talk a lot about machine learning and AI and personalized offers. And I'm like, oh, you haven't identified your customer properly. So how are you going to make sure it's to me that you're selling that to? Where have you seen that process? How are you seeing these two sort of disciplines work more together when it comes to data and it comes to identity being a key attribute, a key sort of indicator of truth, right? Banks have legacies. They have siloed data structures. How do you come in there and try to help them say, hey, the Bianca over here in personal banking is also the Bianca over here in corporate banking, and here's how you do this in a fair, transparent way?
Yeah, it's a lot of discussion about that because we know, and I think we shared in some other event, that there is a big fight between who is managing the data, who is providing the data verification, and somehow banks are in this case, banks are capable to somehow receive a lot of data from their own clients. Governments are also receiving a lot of data from their own clients. At the end, who is making the verification of this specific identity could be done by finance sector, private, could be by public sector, could be by a third party, could be on the cloud in India. So it's a big movement of who is managing the data. And regulators are really afraid about that. Yeah. And privacy is also a big challenge for that. But the truth is that this is a gold mountain that big companies, big players in the market, they know that this is the future in order to develop the business strategy. So what we try to do is very simple. We know that we have to go step by step. And at the end, somehow governments together with the private sector probably should build by region, by market, a kind of data set in order to guarantee that when Bianca is going to a hotel and is making the check-in, is just being verified through the same verification system that when you are going to an ATM in Brazil and trying to withdraw some money, the same verification system should be applied. So data is something that will be managed in a big move in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And identity is going to be just one small part, one small piece of this data management. Data is going to be a big...
I think that the part that I find really interesting is the opportunity for identity to be fluid and contextual. As you said, I couldn't agree more as we wrap up, for people to be thinking about, when you think about biometrics, let's forget Minority Report and let's have the conversations about what kind of standards and what kind of data ethic signals we're putting into our algorithms. I think the time has come where we live in a really crazy world where there's nothing normal about 2020, but I think it has shown us the opportunity in the infrastructure in the world we live in. Javier, I wanted to thank you and say one more time, a great admiration for what you're doing in the FacePhi team, almost like 70 people now. I can't believe I remember when you guys were 14. So for people that are curious about it, I'm sure Fintech Self will have all the information so you can follow FacePhi. And if you want to talk more about identity and biometrics, you can reach out to us. We can talk about this for hours. Javier, thank you so much for tuning in from Spain and bringing our world stage keynote, this discussion about what is the importance of biometric and what is the opportunity ahead for the world of fintech and banking.
Thank you very much, Bianca, and a pleasure being here always.
Thank you so much. Guys, stay with us shortly. We have a lot more program at Fintech South. I'm your host for today's part of World Stage Fintech Americas. If you're curious about it, follow Talle, and I'd be happy to talk to you about identity and biometrics in the future. Take care and have a wonderful part of your day.